pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone.
I didn't call.
Well, good morning. It is good to see all of you. I truly enjoyed these meetings. I hope you guys do as well. All right, I'm going to look for a motion to review the minutes from last meeting. Do I have a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, sir. Sorry, by the way, not Morris. I have a second. All right, any discussion, amendments, any issues with it? If not, I'll look for a vote. All in favor? Aye. All right, let's jump right into resolutions of our day. The first one here is the resolution authorizing County Attorney's Office to initiate litigation against Addis Ethanol Fulton. I think we've discussed this in this committee. I don't think it's the first time we've seen this, but essentially what it is there was a pilot awarded to Addis, the old Sunoco station. That pilot was never paid, and because of that, the pilot was severed, and the money is technically still owed. Now, it is not viewed as a tax, and so we cannot just add it to their bill each year. The only way for the county to get it back is, unfortunately, to sue them to get it back, and that's what this is authorizing us to do. Now, we're just looking to sue to get the county portion. We all, though, are also including the communication to both the school district and the towns so they can get their portion as well. That's only for the year of 2020 when the pilot was expired. 2021 has been added at full.
This has nothing to do with the town or school. This is only
Rich, I'm just informing them. Thank you. So the town and the school obviously are not included as well. They will have to take care of that on their own. I'll look for a motion. Paul? To discuss?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll make a big motion. Second, excellent. All right, discussion, Paul. Negative.
If they don't come, first of all, how much is it? How much do they owe us?
100 and, give me a second. I think it's
148,000.
148. And if the town or the school doesn't get their portion, we still got to make the schools whole.
No, I can defer to Rich here, but what I've been told is that we are only owed to make them whole if it's a tax. This technically is a payment in lieu of taxes,
Okay.
so they would need to sue to get their portion.
And we're already foreclosing on this property for taxes.
Okay.
So we'll end up owning the properties. We have 4 properties if they're not paid. That's a somewhat lesser tax than it would otherwise be on the defaulted pilot because the library and fire, even in a pilot, are assessed on a tax bill. So then now it's defaulted, it's fully taxable, and that starts the whole process.
And that's the thing, you go on Addis's website, they're nothing more than an investment firm. And they actually had a commercial still saying how much product we were pushing out of Seward County ethanol plant. We haven't drawn a drop out of that in, what, a year and a half?
I don't know when the plant shut down. There's a mortgage foreclosure as well. I've been in contact with that attorney. Someone lent $15 million for this endeavor, and they're out of Brooklyn, and they're owed about $45 million, from what they say.
So then going forward, we are responsible for the taxes.
Once it becomes taxable, by operational law, the county has to pay the school, the town, we're the payer of last resort. But we're already foreclosing on the lesser amount of delinquent taxes, and hopefully, hopefully it goes back into business and they pay the taxes. But if nothing else happens, we'll foreclose, and then we can recoup, hopefully, the delinquent tax plus this. But this is a precautionary measure to get a judgment, which would have to attach to the property in order for it to be sold. And there's already a list pendants in the tax foreclosure and a list pendants in the mortgage foreclosure and other judgments.
Okay, thank you.
Great.
148,000, is that for 24 months? How long is that for?
No, that is only the portion that was covered by the pilot. So it would have been from the point where their last payment was to the point where the pilot was severed. I believe it was a total of, was it 15 months? Do you remember?
The pilot payments are due 30 days after the due date, and this was canceled by the IDA board in November. So there's a window in that 1 year where it would have been prorated tax, but because it wasn't canceled, they probably tried to work with them. And so we've got that, but that's not part of the prorated tax.
So Rich did just in essence say we are, like Paul asked, going to make payments for taxes to the school district.
We do that in any delinquent tax property that's on the rolls, that's taxable. That is the county's function because we foreclose.
And then.
And then forget about the city of Oswego, but that's generally what we do outside the city of Oswego and city of Fulton.
We wouldn't be responsible for the city of Oswego, though. Would we?
That's a different, this is in the town, so forget about the cities. Fulton makes this whole, city of Oswego's a little complicated. This is in the town of Volney. We would make town of Volney whole, the fire department, school district, and any other.
Again, not for the year that was covered by the pilot, only the year that ended once the pilot expired.
Once they remove the exemption, it becomes taxable. Thereafter, any delinquent taxes, the county has to make the jurisdictions whole.
I just want to say, it seems we're just willy-nilly giving pilots to everybody and anybody. And I don't think that anybody should have that authority to do this to us. I mean, I looked at the pilot list of what some buildings are paying, and it wasn't even worth the endeavor. I feel we should be looking at business. We're not a tourist area. We need to look at business.
Wait a minute.
Fishing's good. Other than that, we need businesses that need fresh water. The box plant being our biggest loss. It has 600 employees now. We had that in our hands, and we've lost it. Solve paperboard now. So I'm just saying, without jobs and just bringing in these suitcase draggers that you don't want to even sit in a restaurant, I'm sorry, it's alarming what's going on downtown. I really think we have to look at what legally we can do to make us involved in any or all pilots. I think it should be very difficult to get one and should be very short term.
And I think that, if I could, and then Roy, I'll jump to you because you're next in line here too, but as far as the pilot discussion goes, that is something that comes up somewhat frequently. You talk about that quite a bit.
We'll never do anything.
I'll just remind everyone that we do, as a legislature, the legislature appoints the board that awards the pilots, the IDA board. But in addition to that, whenever a pilot is awarded, information is sent not just to the legislator whose district it is prior to the pilot being awarded, but there's also a public meeting to discuss that is filmed and put available, and notices are sent out to all the taxing authorities as well. So at least information is being sent out by that board, our board, on a regular basis. Now, whether the meetings are held at a time when everybody can attend, I know that we're starting to move more to a digital world, and so they are offered on a digital basis. And the taxing authorities are at least being alerted and invited to attend. When a pilot is awarded, it is only awarded upon noticing all the taxing authorities, the legislator whose district it is, as well as the public through a newspaper. If no one attends the public meetings, there is an assumption that people are okay with it. Well, no one's shown up to discuss it.
Well, the Uniform Tax Exemption Policy allows the IDA to award pilots without consent of the jurisdiction.
All that information is still noticed.
The Uniform Tax Exemption Policy, there's been some discussion over the years about revisiting that and revising that. But if there's deviations, then the jurisdictions really...
And the vast majority of our pilots are deviations from that. But what I just want to make sure everybody understands is that information is available prior to a pilot being awarded. So we legislators probably could attend every single one of these meetings if we wanted to. The chairman of the legislature gets a letter on every one, even the ones that are under the uniform, he still gets a letter on. So there's information award.
Could we be copied on every one going forward?
We absolutely could be. And the information is always in the packets that they are sent out to us on a monthly basis as well from Operations Oswego County. But that's usually retroactive.
It's always a month lag.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's usually retroactive.
The horse is out of the barn by the time you get it.
So any pilot that the IDA awards, at least a month to 2 months prior to the award, goes in front of the board for public discussion. That information is noticed to all legislators as well. So there is information available at any of our board meetings, and I say this speaking, I am a member of the IDA, Morris's as well, so I do have obviously a little more opportunity to discuss this than the rest of us, but all legislators are invited to every board meeting. We've actually had some discussions about possibly even having them held here to more include the legislature. So although pilots are a bit of a hot button topic, and they should be, we're technically, though they're not paying what we'd call the fair share, right? They're not. They're being subsidized by taxpayers because there's an interest, hopefully, in job creation, like you said. Something like Sunoco or the Addis plant is a really good example of that. The story that came along with that project was in the thousands of jobs potentially. There was that whole green infrastructure that was coming down the governor's pike, and there was a lot of idea that Sunoco Addis couldn't be this new huge employer in Oswego County. So on that one, I think I might push back a little bit on the jobs idea, because they were selling jobs strong. Ultimately, was there a little bit of a story there that didn't pan out? Yes. Did some of that have to do with pandemic? Yes. Did some of that have to do with the gas prices going down right to the floor? Yes. So I think there's a lot more to that, but go ahead, Mary.
I could make a list that would stagger you of pilots that have been awarded with absolutely no job. They're looking to do a storage at Northern Steel. How many jobs do you think that'll do? I'm storing in a large indoor facility. It requires no jobs, and it's not full. I didn't advertise it, but yeah, okay, maybe, but we're gonna give money to that? I mean, it's outrageous. I think people should put a huge deposit down. That's called skin in the game. Just like people in legitimate business paying full taxes, employees, quarterlies.
Yeah. And that, I think that's a good
And pilots that have been renewed for 25 years with multiple business changes. I can think of many.
And I think that would be a great opportunity for us as legislators to discuss that at one of the board meetings, or, as a legislature.
I think as the year begins, we need to start that ball rolling.
Okay. Well, what I'll do, as IDA board members, we'll make sure that we used to get the notices in our boxes. I think right now they're just made public, so I'll see if we can at least get that put back in our boxes. The meetings are held over on 44 West Bridge Street, across right by the movie theater.
We're giving them money.
So we actually don't give the IDA any money.
Well, we're giving them the tax forgiveness.
Well, the IDA doesn't. The IDA awards that to local businesses, but I know where you're
Well, the taxpayer is.
Right.
We should have governance over that. I'm sorry.
And we do as a legislature too. Remember, we appoint that board completely. 100% of that board is appointed by the
Maybe it needs to be reappointed.
That is a discussion we can have. Marie, did you have anything else on that?
No, I think I'm done for now.
Thank you. Roy, go ahead. And then Morris, I've got you.
Rich, so when did the clock start ticking on the foreclosure? How are we already in foreclosure if it just happened that we canceled
Because they
them?
didn't pay their taxes the year prior to this year, I believe, on
So it was last
Forgive me,
November.
there are many foreclosure parcels, so I can't keep track of all of them, but
Right, but you said it's in
we have
process now. Doesn't it have to be 2 years?
We have 2 years from last year on the defaulted pilot. They didn't pay those taxes.
Okay.
And we sent an 1180 notice. And bear in mind, they could have paid the taxes the day before Thanksgiving. I don't know, but last I knew, they did not pay the taxes, and they were delinquent and subject to foreclosure. And we had sent a 1180 notice to them not to strip the plant, which is a notice by the tax district. And then we issued bills this year with the prorated tax and the full tax, and if they remain delinquent, they will go into foreclosure next year. But we have the two that are already going to go into foreclosure in October, if not otherwise paid. We understand this LLC to be not operational. It's created solely for purposes of this pilot and this investment.
Yeah, there were a couple parcels that weren't covered under the pilot, and so when the pilot wasn't paid, it didn't start our clock, which is unfortunate. Legally, that's the way it works, right? Rich, my understanding of the pilot, lack of a pilot payment doesn't start our clock.
It's lack of a tax payment that starts the clock in the foreclosure.
Exactly. So,
and the resolution before you has nothing to do with tax payment. It's to recoup the defaulted pilot payment, which is a contractual payment. There's two ways that can be recouped. One is that we sue, the other is that the IDA sue. And this resolution authorizes us to sue.
Right.
Can we lock the building and seize their assets
Okay. Just making sure.
if they haven't stripped it already?
We don't have that ability to enter.
Until we have
the mortgage foreclosure that is pending. They may seek entry into the building and may seek, receiver of rents or things like that. We understand there's no activity in the building and that it's pretty much shuttered.
Yeah, there was a discussion at the IDA board meeting last time about working with the mortgaging company, trying to get in there and protect our assets, their assets as well, right? Because they have a $15 million mortgage. So there's a lot of interest in getting that protected at this point. That I don't think that's moving forward. Dave, go ahead.
Morris, go.
Oh, Morris, go ahead, sir.
I just want to make the comment that we, as a county, is no different than a store trying to sell merchandise.
we want to sell Oswego County. We do things that accommodate businesses and industry to come here. And we've got, at this point in time, a lot of land north of Phoenix that's being developed for industrial parks and so on. You have to play against a lot of players when you do things and want businesses and, as you say, as we're talking about multiple people employed. This organization went bankrupt for other reasons.
I don't know if they're in bankruptcy, Morris.
Pardon?
I don't know if they're in bankruptcy.
They
They
are
down
not.
south-
Yeah,
down
that's
south
because we
they
wouldn't be
gone
suing them
through
if they were in bankruptcy.
three of
Yeah.
them. I mean, what I meant by that is that we're not getting things done as fast. But look at the place next door. How long did that sit there? Just got the iron plant there that was making. They just somebody just bought that. It's a great area. It's rail properties, rail everything. We've got everything there, and it's tough to sell. If you're not selling the situation, and the pilots are part of a plan to get them here and get them working. As I said, it's not an easy, and I gotta say, Operation Oswego County people in there do a hell of a job for that small organization to try to do everything they can, because on the dog, any place wants to grab anything they can. I'm just using that as a myth. So it's tough. It's tough. And you will have situations where things go bad. Hopefully this isn't.
I had a question for Rich. Is there some COVID-related stay on moving forward with this, or was there some notice that they were protected somehow under COVID executive orders or something?
On the mortgage foreclosure?
Yeah.
I don't know on the mortgage foreclosure. They'd have to look. They could certainly avail themselves of any rights on the tax foreclosure that any other respondent can. And their hardship, as far as tax foreclosures, hardship declarations that businesses can file, we have hundreds of tax properties, so I'd have to go back and look and see whether they sought this or not. It's a question for the treasurer's office.
And then I know because the chairman and I recently met with the former plant manager. When they shut this plant down, they literally just shut it down. They got a message in the morning, told the employees at noontime, you're out of here. And anything that was in storage, in vessels and being processed, they just turned off the lights. And so I think if we do take this, one of our first efforts should be to work with that mortgage company to make sure we get in there and protect what's left.
The attorney for the mortgage holder, which they are now around 45 million owed on one statement,
Right.
said that they'd like to work with us. And obviously, if they go to a mortgage foreclosure sale, part of that would be to pay the taxes. But this is a contractual payment to the IDA. It's not showing as a tax.
Right.
So you have this gap, and that's what this authorizes suit on. So that's what we're dealing with today. We're not dealing with the tax foreclosure. We're not dealing with the mortgage foreclosure. We're dealing with whether or not we recoup this defaulted contractual payment to the IDA, and then would come to the county.
So I guess as a point of interest then to members of the legislature, there's the utilities stayed on for some time. And I don't know the reason that they eventually were turned off, but when the pumps got turned off, then all the protective measures for areas where water can collect are now at risk. And we're going into winter, and just freezing water in places in that plant could quickly ruin a lot of equipment. So I just like to say, if this comes before you through your caucus or whatever means, I would urge you to support, even if it's an expense, efforts to work with that mortgage company, get in there and take protective measures. This will be the first real winter that nothing's been in place to protect that stuff.
The way this resolution would work has nothing to do with that.
Yeah, I understand.
We would sue the LLC, obtain a judgment on the defaulted payment, docket the judgment, bring it to the sheriff, and have the sheriff levy on their bank accounts assets or real property. Real property is problematic because there's a mortgage on it. There's also taxes on it, also other judgments. So this is just a narrow, and the mortgage foreclosure can obtain entry. The tax foreclosure, we can obtain entry if it gets to that point. But I don't know where the budget is to do what you need to do in there.
Well, and that's another discussion, but we need to get in there first, so that if we could figure out what the steps are to get in there, we can then talk about whether we got money to protect our investment, so.
But they could also pay the taxes and take it out of foreclosure.
Well, and also to mention, the taxes owed at this point are only on the taxes that are past due. They are not, if I talk to the treasurer, you can verify, Rich, is this correct, is that they actually have not even hit and missed yet for the full assessment, correct? Because
I don't know if the 2021s have been paid. I don't think they have. The
problem is you're looking at 20, 30 grand, and if I'm anybody that to protect us from taking, $20 million worth of assessment or whatever it's going to be to pay 20 grand to do it, someone should. All right, but either way, we've got to move forward on this.
Yeah,
this again is just so we can allow us to go get the money that was owed under the pilot. The other portions of it are going to be done automatically. So anything on their assessment is going to be, or on their taxes, are going to be collected as normal process.
And the judgment is only as good as the party we're suing. So
exactly. Any other discussion on that? Right.
Rich, the question's for you. In this company breaking the pilot contract, does that now break the deal and go to full taxes?
Yes.
The IDA voted to rescind the pilot.
Okay.
Yeah.
When they did that, it removes the 412A exemption. And it also provides certain rights under the real property tax law, which apparently they didn't avail themselves of regarding revaluation. Mm-hmm. So right now, the taxes are on a plant that is assessed as if it's operating. Yeah. But again, this is the defaulted payment under the agreement.
And unfortunately, it doesn't. What I asked was, does that then go back to the last time they paid payment and make them past due for that? And it does not. My understanding is tax law treats a pilot in lieu of taxes as not a tax. And so we can't go back.
I'm sure that their resources are somewhere in the Cayman Islands now.
Well, this is an LLC out of New York. They're based out of Georgia, predominantly, the main office.
Okay.
But this is just on the defaulted pilot payment.
All right, now look also on the fifth whereas, there's a little spelling error. We just got to cut that word out. But we'll do that for finalizing it. All right, any other questions, discussions? If not, I'll look for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No, thank you very much. All right, jumping to 2. Rich is here, so I'm thankful for that. If I could look for a motion to discuss.
Motion.
Mel, thank you. Second, Ed. All right. Rich, can you give us a little discussion on why we need to do this and a little background on it before we start?
This is something the legislature has done almost every year that
Why
I've
do we
been.
need to do it this year, Rich?
Well, you don't have to do it this year. We don't have the snow, but it's a protective measure to protect deer. It allows the chair to impose a quarantine if it becomes such that deer are being bothered by dogs. And part of that could be a night quarantine under 121 of the Ag and Markets law, or it can be a complete, if we have 5 feet of snow.
So there's a law in the books, and in order for us to use this law, the chairman has to put it into play. Is that essentially
what the resolution does is allow the chair to impose restrictions, but it has to be published in the paper at least 24 hours in advance, and saying you got to keep your dogs in at night so they're not chasing deer or whatever the language of the statute is mirrored in the resolution. But this is not anything new. This is
no.
We didn't do it last year for some reason, and it appears that over the years the resolution had either they renumbered the statute or the resolution had a typo with a different section, the Ag and Markets. But it falls under control of dogs, protection of deer.
Okay.
And then whenever the governing body determines that deer population is suffering or severe depredation due to dogs attacking, chasing, or worrying deer, it may require all dogs in the municipality or any part thereof be securely confined during a period of time designated in the order, or if no time is designated until the order is revoked.
Okay, so there is the ability for us to take advantage of this, but the only way to do it is if we authorize the chairman to declare it. Is that
what we've typically done is authorize the chair instead of having it go to the legislature in January or February because it may happen in the middle of the month where there's a lot of snow or there's a problem with dogs attacking deer. It could be in part of the county, doesn't have to be in the whole county. And that's what it is. And then one of the options would be a night quarantine, which has confined between sunset, 1 hour after sunrise. And then there's exemptions. A dog shall not be deemed to be in violation of the order of accompanied by and under the full control of the owner.
Got it.
So
is this is something that there must have been some traditional need in our county to utilize this. It sounds like in order to be able to move quickly, we passed a resolution that authorizes the chairman solely to be the one who decides if we're going to go into this lockdown quarantine time. By Ag and Marks allow this to be year-round if we wanted it to be, or is it only by law allowed during that?
I've never seen it year-round. We've traditionally only passed this around the winter months because that's where it's been a problem.
Well, we're passing an authorization for the chairman during the winter months. But I guess my question is that by our own local resolution, or is that by the Ag and Markets law that this season is created?
It just says whenever there's an issue, but traditionally the issue has arisen because of deep snow and the deer.
The resolution, though, is an annual.
It's an annual resolution that we typically.
Outside of that window, if the chairman wanted to, could he put in this with the way the language is written, or no?
There's no limitation as to season. It's an annual resolution. We've not done this in the summer, obviously, because that's not where the issue lies. It's typically been a winter resolution.
Okay, understood. So the resolution gives the chairman authorization during the period that's set forward in the resolution, although the Ag and Markets law is available at all times. Is that correct?
Yeah, Ag and Markets law doesn't have, it says whenever the governing body shall determine. And then the governing body may at any time require, but the issue has typically been due to high snow.
Understood.
And sometimes
it's due
deer,
to high snow because what happens is the deer yard up at certain, if snow gets to be 3 or 4 feet and it just stays for a long period of time, they can't find anything to eat. They yard up together, and so they're almost like in pens. And it's pretty amazing if you've ever seen one. But that's when dogs can get in and just kind of wreak havoc, especially when they're not really trying to eat; they're just attacking. So it goes way back in time. That the reasons for doing this, and that's why it's only done in the winter. I don't ever recall that we enacted it because we probably typically haven't had a need to do it.
I was just trying to make sure I understood what we were doing here, because this is, as you said, we've done this every year, but it's the first time I've actually remembered.
Well, I mean, my recollection, we've done it every year except for last year, which was an unusual year.
Marion?
I have some issues with this. Number one, the perception of the word quarantine starts right out. It just is a red flag for me is to say quarantining, especially with what's going on with everything. And number two, we're worrying about the deer. What about a resolution that is saying that dogs are supposed to be vaccinated, licensed, and under the purview of their owners to be taken care of year-round? We're saying that we're only worried about the deer. What about the cattle? What about horses? What about pets? What about children? Animals should be under the purview of their owners, and we should be doing something there. Not just saying only during this time.
Yeah, there have been other sections of the Ag and Markets law, and when livestock was mauled by coyote or dog, they used to bring in pictures to the treasurer's office for payment. There are other provisions. This is under a section regarding protection of deer. Quarantine is used in the state statute 121 for the night quarantine. I don't think people will confuse it with the COVID quarantine. And it'll be very clear that if they issue an order, if the chair issues an order, what restrictions there are and what limitations there are on the order. We don't generally regulate dogs at the town or city level. That falls to their ordinances and Ag and Markets. We don't issue dog licenses, things like that. We do get involved with rabies vaccinations on dogs and cats through the health department, and we can order seizure of those animals if they're not vaccinated. But that's different than this.
is different than this, but I still see the perception that the only time the county comes out and says dogs need to be under quarantine or kept under control is for during the season of deer.
We've written
issue
pet
with
owners letters saying you need to get your dog or cat rabies shot, and if you don't, we're going to begin a proceeding and take the cat or the dog and get it vaccinated.
So you're saying there are other means that we enforce that piece?
Rabies vector control is completely separate from this. This is just to protect deer. Yeah, that's
in addition to other.
Right.
So Legislator Shutterell's point is that, Rich, if I'm not putting words in your mouth here, but we do concern about that year round. This is a very specific window, a very specific resolution. Is that in addition to what we already have?
This gives the chair the authority to do this.
Right.
And if we have a winter that has no more snow than what we have now, and it's mild, and there's not a need for the deer to, corral, as Legislator Rehill noted, may never be imposed this season. If we have 10 feet of snow, then it might be.
Snow creates a unique situation.
Yeah.
This is a response to a unique situation. Marie, go ahead.
Could you just change it to leash law?
Yeah. Oh, the leash law. We have a leash law. The dogs are supposed to be taken care of. And yet we're saying it's only I just have an issue
You're
with
giving
this.
a double message.
Yes,
We
thank you.
We don't have a leash law.
No,
It's
countywide.
town-
County does not have a leash
town-
law.
Towns do.
Towns do.
Town.
Yeah, by towns that they have a leash law. And the animals are supposed to be under control.
Some of them do.
But I mean, yeah.
Some of them don't.
Well, I think that's the point, is that we obviously oversee a much larger area than just a
Some
town. Certain
towns-
towns have certain rules.
The reason for this is because most towns, and the rural ones, haven't had leash laws for a long time. There's no leash law in Constantia.
Mhm.
So, and there's lots of fields and woods for hunting.
Sure.
If the deer end up yarding up, the local dogs can get at them. That was the purpose of this. It's really pretty straightforward. We don't have a leash law as a county.
Right, so then you're protecting then the towns that don't have any kind of a leash law to say, yes, we have to quarantine your animals, but only when it comes to deer, not cattle, not horses, not pets, not children.
Well, do we have the authority to impose a leash law year-round outside of this, Rich?
I would have to look at that. I think that generally falls to the local municipalities, but I would have to look and see. This is just
What we're doing
as far as deer protection and dogs bothering livestock or chickens or things like that. I'm not prepared to speak to that today. I'm sure there's another section of ag and markets or.
I'm just saying the message. That's all I'm saying, is that we're saying it's only because of the deer. It's not that there's a problem with dogs. I mean, I don't know. I just see this as putting deer ahead of other things, and it's important. I absolutely understand but it's the owner's responsibility to make sure those dogs are not out there. And they're the ones that we should be going after, is the owners. But to say that, okay, you're going to quarantine these dogs. Now, what dogs? All dogs. What about companion dogs? Does that mean that they can't go with their owner someplace? Or they can't go out? I mean,
no.
I don't know. Just
No, if they're with their owner, it doesn't apply.
it doesn't
Yeah,
apply
if a
with
dog
owners.
if dog shall kill or cripple any deer, the owner shall be subject to civil penalty
Okay.
out of $100 for the first deer killed, or maimed by the dog, or pack of dogs, if any, which dog was a member. $150 for each additional deer killed.
Okay, so it does go after the owners.
I got Brad, and I got Paul.
Very interesting today.
I'm sorry.
Rich has got it there, but if you go into this 120 and read it, it's only 6 paragraphs long. Pretty standard, some vagaries, and some are very plain when you read this. In our first paragraph, whereas blah, 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 may suffer depredation. What the 120 says is when they do suffer depredation. So do we really need this in the county? And I appreciate being here. I'm not on this committee, but this is some of the stuff we do. Do we need this? There's a big difference in what goes on in Hastings and what goes on in Boylston as far as how much snowfall and deer depredation. Are we worried about down in Hastings and Central Square how much snow is falling, or are we worried about how much traffic we
Redfield.
got?
Yeah.
Pardon me?
Redfield.
In Redfield.
It need not be in the whole county, it can be part of the county too.
Right, so do we need this for the county? Is this something we want to do? Because I already got the question, why do you want to shoot my dog, et cetera. And then questions like, we're the owner, And Rich already mentioned it's $100 per deer, 150 additional. And so that, like I said, there's some vagaries when you talk down here about the securely confined. What does that mean? But to answer your question directly on here, so if you're out with your owner, I got 135 acres, I let my dog go out to do what he does, and I stay with him, et cetera. He stays on my property. Is somebody walking down, my adjoining property and shoot my dog now? But anyway, the moral of all this story is read the 6 paragraphs and see what you think. Because a lot of the questions that have already been asked are answered in those 6 paragraphs of 120.
And to be clear, 120 is a law that exists. We're not voting whether we want that.
State ag and markets law. And then,
It's already a law on the books, so.
but it requires a municipality to act to impose that.
And this does say in accordance with
Yeah.
section 120.
So this gives, so essentially all we're doing is instead of having to come and bring it in front of this legislature at a meeting, we're giving the chairman the authorization to, with notice, impose it.
Exactly.
Is there a law on the books about the livestock, et cetera?
I can
Do
look
we
at
need
that.
to ask the chairman that he can impose that when he needs to? And what happens on April 23rd? I'll let loose the dogs of war. After that, we don't need to do anything.
Well, I can look at the livestock. I'm sure there's laws regarding livestock. I was not prepared to speak to that today.
Yeah, I'm just saying, if you're gonna give the chairman that ability for deer, should we then have to give him the ability if there's other issues?
And the question is, maybe he doesn't need the ability because that is a year-round issue that has that authority. We'll have to look into that. Paul, go ahead.
Would changing the word make it different? Instead of quarantine, use another word.
Well, I think the reason it's quarantine's in the state.
So quarantine is in the following section regarding night quarantine. One of the things the chair could do is just say, keep them in at night. Don't keep them,
Sure.
don't keep them in here.
Quarantine to me is, your dog's got rabies and you got
Right.
Yeah,
I didn't pick the statute, the language that they use in the ag and markets.
well, that word was used many years ago and it's gone through, but now today's, it means a whole different thing.
Try just to make it.
I know.
David.
So if this hasn't become complicated enough already, just go back to Brad's comments. I believe, and I can't quote you the statute, but under environmental conservation law, I think it's already legal in New York to shoot a dog that's chasing a deer. So
That's true.
shouldn't be confused with that.
right.
No, that's true.
I think you're right.
Okay, so is there any further discussion on this piece? If not, I'll look for a vote. Why don't we do this? As it's currently written, with the word quarantine again, because that is what is in the state law, as much as we don't love it, we'll leave it this way it's supposed. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
One opposed. All right. All right, thank you, everyone. Good discussion. All right, let's jump to 3. Allocating hotel motel occupancy tax revenues, writing distribution of occupancy tax. Now, this is an annual resolution, and this gives us the authorization, correct, David, to collect the additional money that your state law are allowed to collect.
Yes, sir.
And that goes towards our tourism, being that this county is...
With a small amount that's allocated to the treasurer's office for their efforts to collect and report.
I'll move for a motion.
I'll move it.
Second. Roy, thank you. Any additional questions, discussion? Right.
This includes Airbnbs and
It does not.
it does not.
No, our state law for this, our county does not include anything under 6 days, is that correct?
6 units.
6 units.
So it's a pretty,
Yeah, the, almost every county that has the ability to collect, bed tax, occupancy tax, has their own enacting statute, and ours was written in a way that, exempts any, business that has under 6 independent units. So
so
You-
Dave, they
you
don't,
have 5 cabins on your property and you rent them all out, you're not paying bed tax.
do they pay any tax? Do they
They
pay?
should still pay sales tax.
They still pay sales
Okay.
tax.
Yeah.
Just not this 4% that is passed on to the person who comes in.
Mhm.
One of the
It's on
discussions had been to
I
talk to
wasn't
the,
here when it happened.
yeah, one of the, 88 is when I believe it, 1202H was enacted, or around that time. One of the discussions that has been going around is to talk to the state electeds to see whether they'd carry an amendment to allow the 6 or fewer units to be removed. because VRBO, Airbnb, some of these other entities have agreements with many other counties and municipalities that they will, those on their sites, they will collect the hotel tax and the sales tax and give it to the treasurer as part of their service to the owner of the rental properties.
But again, that is not something locally
we can't have a law that is contrary to state law, so we're limited on that. Some counties have campgrounds, some counties have other things. Some counties have fewer restrictions on the use of their money that they receive. They can use it for general county purposes.
Okay, Rick, that's enough.
All right, that's a good question though. Roy, go ahead.
Well, on that point, I think it's appropriate that we do something to encourage our state legislators to do something before the next budget session, before the next time they get together and create a new budget. So whether, I think we should all encourage everybody else in the legislature just to bug the chairman to have personal meetings with our state legislators. I think we should try to do that ourselves. I think we should do everything. Should be a full court press. We're missing out on about $250,000 a year.
More than that. I think that the numbers I gave you at the last meeting were related only to one.
If that was only came up, that was just Airbnb, and it came out to like 125,000. So I mean, that's just a guess, anyways. We don't know exactly what we're missing out on, but we know it's approximately. So over the last 4 years, we've missed out on $1 million that could be used for for promoting tourism in Oswego County. All the people that are running these Airbnbs are benefiting from that, especially the ones that are promoting fishing and all the Airbnb. If you saw the data, it was really interesting to see how many of them are on the North Shore of Oneida Lake, how many are on the Salmon River, how many are on Lake Ontario. They're benefiting. That's all tourism.
Well, at the end of the day, we spend money to bring people here. We don't tell them where to stay, but we bring people here. So everyone benefits equally through the promotions that we do to get visitors to come here. And only a portion of the people are helping us support that through the collection of occupancy tax.
So it's an aside from this, what we're doing here, but it's important to remind everybody that we need to do a full court press somehow on our state legislators, however we do it, whether it's a resolution from this committee, resolution from the entire legislature, letters from all of us, pressure. It's not that big a deal. It should be a no-brainer. So that's
good discussion there. Marie, do you have anything else on that one?
Well, I mean, I even think the new plants are being mentioned because a lot of rooms and things are going out, like Airbnb, to transient workers at the new plants, which is a huge amount of people coming through. I just don't think it's fair to the hotel owners. I'm just trying to look for a level playing field.
Yeah, it's not.
It's a fair discussion.
I agree.
Okay, so this one again is just allowing us to charge ours. So I would look for a vote on this. If all in favor of continuing at least what we have currently, say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, I think that's a good discussion we need to have going forward. All right, jumping to Resolution 4, authorizing budgetary modifications, Department of Community Development, Tourism Planning, Public Transportation Funds. Dave, this is just a correction on a line of the budget, right? We just we technically didn't include it as was it federal but should have been state, or vice versa?
No, you had it right.
Okay, excellent. So really just more of anything is just changing it from the name from state to federal. No, other way around, federal to state. All right. Motion, Roy, second. Ariel, thank you. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. And then lastly, resolution authorizing the chairman to enter into a data sharing agreement with Tug Hill Commission. This one's an exciting one, kind of a cool new thing. Dave, you want to give us a little summary on that?
Yeah, so I think that there's general consensus amongst your members that broadband improvements throughout the county is a priority for us to pursue. And we've had several partnerships, one with Central New York Regional Planning Development Board. There's a state level effort to collect data. The Tug Hill Commission undertook a project where they looked at all the areas that they serve. They did really very comprehensive approach, and part of that was to also get data from private sector providers that had to be declared proprietary. And in order for us to take full advantage of the data that Tug Hill collected, we need to assure them that we won't misuse the data that they have access to. And this really is just an agreement saying we really want this, and we agree to whatever terms you have with Spectrum or Charter or any of the satellite providers, Frontier, anybody who's given Tug Hill data about what they own and where it is. We're saying we'd like to use it, and we promise not to give it to anybody else.
Great, the sharing agreement. Let me look for a motion to discuss this. Morris, second. Ed, thank you. Do you have any questions for Dave or about this? Oh, Rich, go ahead.
I believe the agreement requires an individual, not an office, to be responsible for the data, certified data destruction. We can change it before the floor voted out of committee. As Dave noted, some of the, we looked at this, some of the material is proprietary from utilities like Spectrum and Windstream or other providers. And at the end of the county's use of that information on these maps and shape files, we've got to certify it's destroyed or request through a process that we'd be able to keep it. And they want one individual, to my recollection, one individual to be responsible for that. So that was my initial concern. I couldn't understand why we're destroying work that we would be doing, but it became apparent when it's customer information. That's why.
Okay, great. Anybody else?
Also allows us to give them information about our 911 address database, so they have a complete accounting of where we believe everyone is. And as such, we ran this by our IT and 911 folks, and they're fine with it.
No, that's exciting. Everything we've been talking about with the need for broadband in this county, and if we're ever going to expand, infrastructure is 100% necessary. Obviously, we've talked about wastewater, we've talked about water. Broadband is kind of the next one, and we've been talking about funds that could be available. Next steps, we've got investment we've already made, so this is really a good partnership. So I appreciate the work that's been done. Any questions? Anybody else? Look for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Thanks, everyone. Dave, do you have any updates for the committee?
I think, I don't remember reporting to you that you'll recall not long ago we had public hearings on a community development block grant program. Donna Scanlon came before one of your meetings and talked about her application for just over $1 million that would be shared with a couple of not-for-profit providers throughout the county. We were notified recently that we were awarded that, and for your general information, there's 4 activities, and one is with Oswego County Opportunities. It has to do with congregate care facilities, providing increased air filtration units for places like that in order to prevent the spread of airborne diseases. There are about 350,000. There's an affordable housing unit that's run by the Oswego County Housing Development Authority in Redfield, an old schoolhouse that's about 776,000. Then there's equipment for a couple other programs, 208,000. Building across the street that was recently purchased by Victory Transformation. Backup generators and air purification, 236,000. And general apartment repairs available to landlords for creating safer environments. And that's about 82,000. For the administration of all of that, and our efforts to monitor it, will take in just around $34,000. So a little bit of work on our part, but we get compensated for it as we try to provide safer, healthier housing options for these various agencies.
Great, thanks, Dave. It's good information.
And one last thing, the potential for wind turbines in Lake Ontario has arisen again. Was kept kind of low profile for a while, but through the need for public participation, we try to get the word out so that people could learn more about it. If you recall, Governor Cuomo changed the siting laws for electric generators, and so it's out of the hands now of communities to decide if there's going to be a power plant or wind turbine in your neighborhood. That is at the sole discretion of New York State. And we have, your legislature has in the past, passed resolutions opposing wind turbines in Lake Ontario for a variety of reasons. And if that's still your position, I'd encourage you to consider reaffirming your opposition to New York State on this particular topic.
Last time they brought this up, it was through Public Service Commission, I think. And this was a few years ago, and they promised that they wouldn't bring it up again if the communities were opposed. And most of the counties along this arc were opposed, and it dropped. So now instead of through PSC, they're bringing it up through NYSERDA. And so they're holding all these meetings all year long on trying to get input, not just here in the Great Lakes, but also off of Long Island. But they are accepting comment. As Dave said, if we're still opposed, I would encourage you to do a resolution in opposition.
When is that deadline for responses?
For governments, I don't think there really is a deadline, but I would do it sooner rather than later.
Okay. Is that one so we could put through at our normal process and have for next committee meeting?
It'd be, unless there would be objection, it'd be simple enough to pull the old resolution and just redate it and change any terms that are on there. I mean, it was pretty comprehensive the first time around, other than the fact that, other than the fact that the state's kind of taken control of where these things are placed. Not much has changed.
Okay, thank you.
It could be, if you don't want to do it quick, for December 9th, it may be something we can put on the organizational meeting agenda. The committee wants to see it first before it goes on.
Sure. I got Ed then. Right.
I sat in on their public hearing last week and submitted several questions, that none of which were addressed then, and none have been addressed via email like they promised.
I had the same.
The same luck. Yeah, but in lieu of the marine sanctuary too, that was never brought up or even addressed, and I tried to get them to address that. I did learn a lot. I didn't realize that some of these things can be floating. And that's what they're actually proposing out here from our shore because of the base not being able to attach the base or whatever. But I encourage that we reiterate our stance on that.
My concern is that we host one of the largest raptor migrations in the world along the edge, and I think we've done enough damage overall. We're seeing declining numbers. I've always supported, Kevin Hodgson used to lead it, a retired veterinarian. He's led bird groups all over the world. And he said, Marie, this is devastation for not that much consistent power. And he's somewhat of an expert on it. And I mean, from that standpoint, I think somebody's got to look and speak for the wildlife that will be shredded.
Yeah, I think, as, Roy, I'll jump right back to you in a second, but I think as far as the mindset goes, as long as nothing has changed since our last opinion, I would assume we would all be into the same one. We have the process for putting these out there. Again, I think it would make sense to do that, but if there's a
I would
time
love
frame,
to
then-
include the raptor numbers, and I mean, maybe we could get them, because I think that is a viable source of support from people.
Sure. Roy.
If Dave is addressing this, you can go to him.
Yeah, so in this webinar that they hosted recently, they listed some of the results of their environmental studies, and species that they felt were impacted were identified as receptors. And on the list of receptors, no raptors were included, even though there were plenty of other bird species. And
What did they include?
I can't tell you for
Can you
sure.
email me the list, Dave, and I'm gonna send it on to Ken, because
Yeah.
raptors are definitely,
I specifically asked the question.
Subgroup or something, they did mention it, but it was not one of the major groups that they were talking about.
Right, and also trout and salmon, even though they listed some other species, trout and salmon weren't listed on there, interestingly. And why that's interesting to me is that there's been studies that electromagnetic currents can disrupt migratory patterns of fish that migrate, like salmon. They come back to where they believe they were born. And even though these studies exist, and they're proposing to put these cables underwater, which, by the way, run right in front of the Salmon River, they weren't identified as a receptor that could potentially be harmed through this process.
have they done
They
any
didn't answer that
studies?
question
Have
either.
they done any studies with this?
I asked the questions specifically, and they didn't answer it that day and haven't answered it since, similar to Ed's experience. So
I think that's appalling. I mean,
And these virtual public hearings are not well attended.
No.
I was on one, I was the only non-participant. For the whole thing.
Thank you.
Okay, so I agree completely with you that that should be part of it if we could make it part of it. And I don't think we should wait. I would suggest that we have a special committee meeting of this committee before the next legislature meeting, since we're going to be here all day anyways, and try to prepare both of these. One, a resolution that requests that our state reps to go after the Airbnb money, change the state law so that we can collect that, and then also add as much as we can to this existing resolution having to do with opposition to wind turbines, to add in, these critical issues of potential disruption of fish migration and potential harm to the raptors. I don't see why we wouldn't put that right into the resolution.
we might be able to get an expert on the raptors and the migratory birds.
That would be important, I think.
And, I mean, we could ask that the studies be provided to us, and maybe as a group, we could send the letter to the state with all of us behind it, crafted maybe by Rich and whoever, noting that, the bed tax, it seems selectively enforcing against hotel and motel owners. So it's telling you, go small, go under the radar.
Well, why don't we do this? If we could, and it's up to this committee, but I would encourage us to utilize the process that we utilize, unless there's some sort of time constraint that says otherwise. this bed tax one is going to be state law. That doesn't have to be rushed. We have a process for this. Unless there's some timeline that requires we have this in by a certain date, I'm a procedure guy. Let's go through the process. We'll put it on. We don't need to put it on next week's special meeting unless there's some sort of timeline saying we need to. I would prefer to have the process followed. Roy, go ahead.
I'll verify the date for you.
Well, okay, so next month or in January, we don't know who's going to be on this committee, and we're not going to have any committee meetings. There are no committee meetings in January. Is that correct?
It depends how quickly the chairman appoints them, so it's possible.
Last year there was
It's possible to have them at the end of January.
So assuming there won't be, and assuming we won't be the committee, I don't understand why we would wait. I mean, if we can get the information together and we can have, we're going to be here. We're going to be here all day long. We can discuss it in our caucuses. We can tweak the resolutions if we need to. We can get as much information as we can get beforehand. I don't see a reason to wait. I think waiting is what government does best, and this is not a time to wait.
I'd like to argue that hopefully our government and us specifically would put together the time it takes to put something that's well crafted, well researched, and not just rush it through because maybe I won't be here next week. You as a legislator will have a seat at the table regardless of whether you're in this committee or not. We don't rush these things together because I may not be in the room next month. I think.
Well, I agree. If we can't be comfortable with the language, if we can't get enough information, then yeah.
Well, that's the whole point of a committee is that we have this information we can advance, we have time to research it. The whole point of having our attorney here is that we have a week to put things together and we can discuss with him. We then reason it out in this committee through discussion, through a normal clocked meeting. And we've been here over an hour now. We've had time to discuss this. Rushing things together because we don't have the information right now, I think is poor decision making. I think as legislators, it's our responsibility to get the information together, to follow the process unless there's a reason otherwise. We have the ability to move things on the floor every single month if we want to, but we don't. We use our normal process so that we can have it well researched and we can have the discussion the way it's supposed to be. And I think that unless there's some reason otherwise, which would mean a time crunch, which I'm fine with, I mean, we walk things to the floor, but we don't do it purposely. We don't do it traditionally. We don't do emergency meetings because you don't have the full time. You don't have the public's input like we would usually. We're rushing things together. Let's take the time. Let's put the process together. If you're not here, well, you can still come. Brad's here today, and we've definitely heard him out. I think that we follow the correct process. We do it the way we're supposed to unless there's a time-wise saying otherwise. That's my take. Go ahead, Brad. So,
Ed, both you and Dave attended this NYSERDA. What's the timeline for what's going on with these turbines? And since it's already out of our hands, basically, we're fighting uphill.
Right. I can't tell you specifically if there's an end date for comment, but I will get that quickly and get it to the committee for your information.
I mean, if they're telling us that the comment period is over.
Oh, I agree. And that was my point, is if there's a time crunch, then I'm 100% agree with you. If it's not, then we go through the process. That's my take.
So who's going to find out? Dave?
I'm looking right now.
Okay.
Right, Bill's on it.
I don't want to, listen, if there's a window closed, we don't want to miss it. I
The
agree.
government doesn't wait. I'm looking now.
Have we talked to anybody at the fish hatchery? I mean, just wondering if they could add some insight to this, if this has happened elsewhere in the country, and is it affect migration?
Typically, a state agency will not comment on something that's spearheaded by another state agency.
Even if it affects like wildlife, I mean.
Pretty much.
Do we have any numbers about people that come out for to see the raptors when they gather? I mean,
the site, Derby
Hill
Hill is managed by the Onondaga County Audubon Society, and I'm sure they have numbers. They track
it's a big deal.
pretty
It
well.
makes the news every year. I don't know how many.
Well, it's thousands. Some days they count thousands of various species that are coming down that pipe.
It just seems to me that language about the importance of our environment to us here because of tourism, because of the fishing industry, because of the uniqueness of that raptor migration, that language really needs to be in whatever resolution that we do with as much backup as possible. So I agree that if we can't get it together with adequate, information to back it up, we should wait, but I just don't like the idea of waiting at this point, when they're talking about, you know, putting turbines up without regard to what we say. I mean, we should be trying to make a pretty big stink.
Okay, they do not publish an end date for public comment. However, what they do publish is that the study, the Great Lakes Wind Feasibility Study, began in February of 21 and is expected to be completed by the end of 21. With the study will be filed with the Public Service Commission in early 22. So it seems to suggest that they are on track to finish their study by the end of this year, which, you know, might suggest that if you want to
Be on the record.
We want to be on the record, we
you
need
should
to do it
before the
now.
end of the year.
All right, so why don't we do this? Can we tentatively schedule a special meeting with the purpose of having this as, does it need to go through this committee?
It can go through the committee or it can go directly to the legislature.
Yeah, I
It
feel like
always
something-
came out of this committee.
All right,
Both of these would be important to come directly through the legislature, obviously, with full support of the legislature. However we do it, I don't think it matters, but I mean, since we're bringing it, I think if we all agree that it's important, let's have the special meeting. So we can say, hey, let's put our name on it. This is important.
And at that meeting, we'll have all the data that we need for the Raptors as well as the
I
salmon.
just texted Ken Hodgson, he's in Florida. I'll see what I can come up with.
all right, so why don't we schedule a tentative meeting? Does that sound okay?
Yeah.
To discuss this.
Generally, these processes this is a study. This isn't proposing any law or regulation. So if you want to comment on the study, you should do it by the end of the year. Typically what would happen is if the Public Service Commission moves to establish regulations and allow this, then there's another public comment period on it. The benefit of doing something during the study is to try to affect it early enough and be on the record as part of that study. But you will have other opportunities if this progresses, because they have to publish regulations and get public comment before anything is fully adopted. This is the study portion of this.
Well, if they've already been at it for a year and they're only just now having these final,
Well, they've had about 4 of them during the year, throughout the year.
yeah, but this is likely the final.
Mhm.
How many more are they going to have? They're
They're
going
all
to
done.
have in December. Is there any scheduled?
No.
Okay, so we can assume that they're done with the public hearings for comment. I think we better get on the record.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll do that for the next meeting. We'll just do that.
Ounce prevention
Okay.
for the public here.
And we have a basis to the previous resolution, right? We can just add the marine sanctuary.
Updated, yeah.
And
Make sure
our
that
concern
stuff
about the rapture.
Marie was talking about too. It's on there.
At least we're not starting with square one.
Yeah, sounds good.
I went back and looked at the Tug Hill Agreement. It requires the name of an individual as data steward.
Okay.
So I don't know if you want to amend that resolution now or do it on the floor, but
Do we have a name right now?
it can't be an office. It has to be an individual that's responsible.
Okay. Why don't we have that for the floor and we'll
Okay.
end on the floor. David, do you have anything else on that?
Yeah, not to be cynical, but I just get nervous when I see studies that are narrowly focused and perhaps intentionally avoid areas of significant concern. It's almost like the handwriting's on the wall. So I would encourage you to do whatever's in your power to let people know how you feel about it.
Sounds good. We're gonna do that. All right. Anything else? Roy.
I have a question for Dave. Dave, have you been attending the Central New York Regional Planning and Development Committee meetings at all?
I am not on the board this year, no, but I do get the minutes and sometimes call into the meetings when there's things of interest to projects that I'm working on.
What's the hot topic right now there, weren't they doing some sort of a watershed study for North Shore of Oneida Lake? Is that completed?
I don't know, Roy.
Okay.
I'm on that committee, Roy.
You've been going?
I didn't go, they've been virtual because they.
Yeah, I am too.
COVID.
Well, thank you both for going, because I think that's really important.
But the big topics have been discussion of broadband, and the biggest one is the 81 corridor.
Right, all broadband, because they just did the study.
Yeah.
So they have results of that as well?
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you have access to the minutes for those meetings, Ron? I know that they're made public as well, so.
To the Central New York Regional Planning Development minutes, I don't know.
Yeah, they're online, just like
They're
ours
online,
are.
okay.
Yep.
And is your department working on anything that has to do with, the, changing of the districts for, what's the term?
Redistricting.
Redistricting, yeah.
Yes, we've taken a look at the census numbers that came in. We also looked at what they call the census data adjusted for prison populations. We've identified districts that need to be tweaked. And we understand that by this time next year, the process needs to be completed and adopted so that you'll have districts in place for petitioning for the 2024 election period. 2023 election period.
Right.
What needs to be completed before the November general next year?
Okay, so.
In order for it to be,
Oh,
it has to go,
It has to go to referendum.
I believe, well, if there are no, we'll have to take a look and see what the results are, but
Yeah.
it should likely go to referendum, either mandatory or permissive.
So the study that you created, have you generated any maps from that?
So, yes and no. We took the map that shows the existing districts, which was based on the census tracts that were in place in 2010 and the numbers that were in them. What's happened as a result of the 2020 census process is that some boundary lines on census tracts have changed. So a 2020 map showing the existing districts won't show you the same lines that the 2010 map. So working from the 2010 map, we've identified which districts need to be adjusted. And they're small numbers for the most part.
So what's the guidance that you're using to move the lines?
So each district should be within 2.5% plus or minus of the average population. So you take the population adjusted for prison data and divide it by 25. That gives you the baseline. You look at the count in 2020 for the districts and put 2.5% on either side of each of the median number, and then you know what your target is.
So the population of the entire county has decreased.
Yeah.
And Roy, the criteria under municipal home rule law, I think it's around section 24, the statutory criteria.
If you have 5 seconds, I'll get the map off the chairman's desk and I can show you a little bit more detail about that if you're interested.
Oh, that would be great.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if you want to do it during the meeting.
Yeah, can we, anyone who's interested in staying out afterwards to check that out,
Yeah,
we
you
can.
should
If
let
we
me
need to
know.
make that an agenda item, we can totally discuss that in our next meeting for those who are in attendance.
Well, I just think it's important for us to know that that's happening. Has this been reported to any other committee?
We haven't, all we were asked to do informally was to take a look at the data and understand if changes needed to be made. And that's what we've done. No one has asked us to do anything else, but we're prepared to begin the process whenever you direct us to.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd like to look at the map.
So those will be made available after this meeting. Any other questions? Go ahead, Mary.
I just have, Rich, thank you for giving me copies of the Ag and Markets 120. I think it clarifies a lot of things for me, but I just have two things. I have to laugh. Throughout it, they always talk about that the dogs need to be confined, and that was throughout it, and yet the title of it is quarantined. It would be nice to be just confined, I guess, but that.
And the second one uses quarantine, the night quarantine.
Yeah, but all the way through it, confinement. The only
Yeah.
time you see quarantine is at the very top. But anyways, my question is, when there is a state law like this, why do we need to tell the chairman that he can utilize it? Shouldn't the state law be the state law? Why do we need to, I'm just curious.
Well, it says the municipality must or may do this. The municipality acts generally through the legislature.
Okay.
You have a meeting in December around the 9th. The next meeting may be as late as January 8th to organize. I don't know when the organizational meeting is. And then to call the whole legislature back for this would be a little cumbersome.
Okay.
Alternatively, I suppose the chair could declare a state of emergency to do this, but it would seem to be a little heavy-handed to do a state of emergency just
If
for...
there's no snow, we don't need
Right,
it.
exactly.
If
So,
there's 5 feet of snow and it lasts 3 weeks, then we may need it.
Okay.
yeah, and this just gives the chair discretion, if needed, to impose this in all or part of the county.
Okay. I was looking just at laws in general.
Yeah,
You
and
know,
I
it's like
can- I
the state
can
law,
look up-
should we have
I
to
can-
follow it if we don't need to give the chairman
Well,
permission to say if we have to?
You act through voting, and the chair it doesn't have independent authority to act on behalf of the legislature unless it's under state of emergency or clearly enumerated in state law.
Okay. Thank you.
No, you're good.
Go ahead, Morris.
Yeah, I would like to thank each and every one of you for your relationship. I hope to be here for these meetings during December. But it's been a great experience and a great group of people. I've always been interested in economic development. And luckily, I've had the pleasure of serving on the IDA and other committees. So you're a great bunch because you question everything. That's what we want, what we need. So thank you very much.
Thank you for
Thank you,
your
Morris.
service.
Yes.
All right.
Been no greater champion of this committee than you the last 30 years I've been around.
All right. All right. If nothing further, then I look for a motion.
So moved.
All right. Second. There it is. All in favor?
All right.
All right. Thank you, everyone.